Cold open hook. A single bead of sweat traced the edge of her brow as the F-18's landing gear snapped into place. The runway lights blurring beneath her 20. Lives burdening her slender shoulders in a heartbeat. Backstory thread. Lieutenant. Mara Whitlock's morning began like any other, the metallic scent of the hangar floor, the distant hum of F-18 engines warming up, the low murmur of men her peers, comparing last night's sorties. She moved among them with quiet precision. Her flight suit pulled snug over a frame that bore hints of disciplined strength rather than brute force. A slender woman in her early 30s, Mara carried herself with a guarded grace. Her hazel eyes flicked between the polished canopy of her jet and the worn leather boots of the crew chief's son, who always seemed surprised to see her there. In the corners of the compound, whispers followed her like contrails. They called her just a college girl, thanks to the mock patch she'd once sewn on her flight jacket. They didn't know she'd graduated top of her class at West Point, or that her father, an elite sniper in special forces, had taught her the stillness of a perfect shot, or that her mother, a decorated battlefield medic, had shown her how to keep breathing when everything inside you screamed to stop. She ducked into the cramped maintenance bay where the technician Lawson frowned at the instrument panel of her jet. Gripping a cleaning rag with careful hands, Mara began polishing the canopy's edge, her movements practiced and assured. Around her, the men bickered over torque values as if she weren't there. Let them talk, she had more important things on her mind. Drop a if you've ever been underestimated. Mara caught herself thinking the phrase as if it were a mantra. She'd grown used to underestimation, to the sideways glances when she walked through the mess hall, to the raised eyebrows whenever she volunteered for simulations. Inciting incident. The base alarm shattered the morning routine. A Level 3 disaster alert. A civilian transport plane had suffered dual engine failure 40 miles offshore. A Category 5 storm barreling in fast. 20 souls on board, no chance to ditch at sea. No carrier within range. The mission commander's eyes darted to Mara. "Lieutenant Whitlock," he said, voice tight. "F-18 flight lead, you're up." A ripple of disbelief passed through the squadron. She was the only one who'd logged carrier landings in the simulator, virtually flawless each time, but none of them had the nerve to trust a college girl with real people's lives. Mara shrugged into her helmet, her voice a measured whisper over the coms. On station in 5 minutes. Her pulse hammered not from doubt, but from adrenaline. She strapped herself into the cockpit, fingers dancing over switches and gauges as if greeting old friends. Drop a if you're ready to see her prove them wrong. Crisis and reveal. The flight was a blur of white-knuckle precision. Hearing the roar of the storm through her visors, Mara guided the F-18 beneath low clouds. Eyes locked on the ticker, showing the transport's altitude dropping. A rogue gust slammed her wing, but she countered with practiced ease. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Remain still. Find the calm. Drawing nearer, Mara scanned the stricken plane's descent path. The transport was losing pitch control. No time for formation maneuvers. She toggled the CUM. Transport calsign 09er. This is Hornet 2-1. I have control clearance. Brace for tow. A collective gasp crackled through the CUM channels. No pilot had ever towed a civilian transport with an F-18, but Mara's slender fingers flicked the tow line release and secured it, an improvised technique she'd perfected against her mother's crash test dummies during late-night simulations. Storm broke open as lightning carved the sky. Mara leaned forward, her heart steady. Engines throttled. She took the weight of the burning fuselage onto her wings. Each degree of bank, each nudge of the stick, guided 09er toward the carrier deck that loomed like an island of safety amid the Black Sea. Below, on the deck, men scrambled to clear the landing zone. Mara's radio crackled, approaching. Touchdown, maintaining tow tension. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, as if coaxing a frightened animal. Then, in one fluid motion, she released the tow cable, snapped the F-18 into a hard right bank, and slid her jet's wheels onto the deck with catapult precision. A cheer thundered over the Cums, undeniably human, raw and unrestrained. Mara didn't celebrate. She sat upright, unbuckled, and removed her helmet, revealing sweat-darkened hair plastered to her temple. Her hazel eyes glimmered with something deeper than triumph, purpose, resolution, and reflection. Back in the hangar, the after-action team swarmed, checking instruments and assessing stress damage. Mara crouched beside the downed transport, where engineers marveled at the minimal strain on its fuselage. A colleague, Sergeant Harris, nudged her shoulder. "You did what?" His tone was equal parts awe and disbelief. Mara's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. What needed doing? She thought of her mother's lessons in the med bay, how to steady a trembling hand, how to save a life under impossible conditions, and of her father's sniper creed: one shot, one life, one chance to get it right. Tonight, she had lived those lessons, but as the adrenaline faded, a new weight settled in her chest. 20 lives saved, yes, but the storm raged on, and the world would expect more of the woman who'd just moved from the shadows into the spotlight. Drapa, if you believe this is just the beginning. The hangar lights flickered as distant thunder rolled across the deck. In that moment, Mara Whitlock allowed herself a single, unguarded thought. They'll never see me coming next time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Cold open hook. A single red warning light pulsed on the console as alarms blared. Mara Whitlock's gloved hand hovered over the eject button, the choice between life and death flashing before her eyes. Backstory thread. The morning after Mara's unexpected heroics, the compound felt different, electric with possibility and tension. Men who had once barely nodded in her direction now conceded grudging respect, though their eyes still betrayed surprise. Mara moved through the corridors. At dawn, each echo of her boots against the concrete floor reminding her that what happened on the deck would never leave her. Yet, as she braked to adjust her flight suit, sliding her hand over the polished insignia on her chest, she replayed her parents' voices, her father's low drawl. "You're never just anyone in that cockpit. You're the one with the shot." Her mother's gentle insistence: "Trust your training, Mara, even when it feels like you're alone." Inside the cramped briefing room, Lieutenant Colonel Briggs cleared his throat. He was a battle-hardened veteran in his 50s, with lines cut deep by stress and loss. Still, his gaze softened when it landed on her. "Lieutenant Whitlock," he began, voice carrying both praise and caution. "Your actions saved 20 lives yesterday. But the storm that cripples a transport one day can escalate to a hurricane the next." His eyes flicked to the map projected on the screen, where a swirling maelstrom edged closer to the coastline. "We have a level 4 alarm. An offshore drilling platform has been struck by rogue waves. Structural damage is severe. The crew is trapped below decks. The F-18s will provide cover for the rescue boats, but conditions are untenable. I want you leading the mission." A ripple of chatter erupted, but all voices wilted under Briggs' steady stare. Mara nodded, voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Understood, sir. I'll coordinate with the search and rescue team." She caught a flicker of pride in his eyes before they hardened once more. Dismissed. Outside, raindrops began to patter against the reinforced glass. Mara pulled her headset over her helmet, each click a note in a prelude she'd heard too many times. She took a breath. "Drapa, if you're ready to see her face a new kind of storm." Inciting incident. Minutes later, aboard the lead F-18, Mara peered through the cockpit's rain-spattered glass at the distant platform, a perma-coton skeleton of steel and precarious catwalks lit by intermittent lightning. The platform's distress beacon. blinked like a beacon in the darkness. On the headset, the platform's captain broke through. "This is Platform Echo Tango 9. We're losing power on deck. Sea floodings reached critical levels. Recommend immediate extraction." His voice trembled, edged by panic. Mara's voice was calm, her tone the only anchor in the storm. "Echo Tango 9, this is Hornet 2-1. Stand by for assessment. Hold tight, help is coming." Her wingman, Lieutenant Ramirez, peeled off for reconnaissance. Mara watched his sleek form dip below the cloud line, heart thudding. She tapped her helmet mic. "Ramirez, report." No response, just static and the howling wind. Something in the static crackled a faint, desperate transmission from the platform. "We're going under ... Can't hold." The feed cut. Mara slammed her fist on the canopy frame. The platform was moments from catastrophe, and with boats still hours away, time was a luxury they didn't have. Drapa, if you've ever had your calm shattered in an instant. Crisis and reveal. She banked the F-18 sharply, slipping beneath the lower cloud layer, eyes scanning for survivors clinging to the catwalks. Below, waves like walls of glass crashed into the steel pillars. It was as if the sea itself sought revenge. Mara's hand hovered over the throttle. The only way to keep the platform from slipping under was to stabilize it somehow. But no pilot had ever attempted an aerial tether to a stationary offshore structure. Her mind raced back to late-night simulations with her mother's trauma team improvising attachments, jury-rigging hoists from UH-60 Black Hawk medevac gear, and her father's lessons on calculating winch kinetics in the heat of battle. She flicked a switch, deploying the F-18's refueling probe, piece of gear they never tested for structural support, and drove it through the reinforced hull. Wall of the platform's control cabin. A shudder ran through the jet and the platform alike. Inside the cabin, a survivor's cry echoed. "It's holding barely." Mara keyed her comm. "Platform Echo Tango 9, this is Hornet 2-1, secure the line. We're pulling you above water level, prepare for lift." Below deck crewmen scrambled to tie the platform support cable to the probe. Mara eased the throttle forward, the jet's powerful engine roar mingling with the storm's fury. Inch by inch, steel girders groaned as the platform's submerged sections rose. Above the chopping waves, the jet's wings buckled under the strain. Mara's jaw clenched as she fought to maintain altitude. Through the wind and chaos, one man's voice cut clear. "Keep going, Lieutenant." Heart hammering, Mara willed the F-18 upward, every muscle screaming. Lightning split the sky overhead, illuminating the miracle below. A platform, battered but intact, floating above the sea. "Drapa, if you can feel the electricity in the air right now." Resolution and reflection. As the platform steadied, rescue boats surged in from the distance. Mara released the probe, letting it snap back to the jet with a thunderous clang. She banked away, engines screaming, and punched the afterburner, disappearing into the clouds like a phantom. Back on solid ground, the rescue commander approached, voice thick with gratitude. "Lieutenant Whitlock, you just saved 50 lives. 50 souls." Mara exhaled, sweat and rain mingling on her skin. She stripped off her helmet, revealing a face both triumphant and exhausted. "I did what I had to," she whispered, fingers brushing the insignia on her suit where her mother's medic badge was sewn beside her father's sniper wings. Inside, a spark of doubt flickered. Each victory carved her name into the legend of the compound. Yet with that fame came expectations. Expectations she had not asked for. She imagined her parents watching from afar, proud, concerned, knowing that with each mission their daughter stepped further into danger. She pressed a finger to her temple, remembering her father's final words over the radio after her graduation flight. "Stay hidden until you need to strike, then strike true." The storm's echoes still thrummed through her veins as she walked away. But before the thunder faded, a voice crackled on her comm headset, her next mission briefing, more urgent than before. A flash of lightning silhouetted her figure, slender, determined, unstoppable. And in that moment, Mara Whitlock knew. The calm before the next storm was her greatest weapon and her only respite. End of Part 2. Cold open hook. A single red warning light pulsed on the console as alarms blared. Mara Whitlock's gloved hand hovered over the eject button. The choice between life and death flashing before her eyes. Backstory thread. The morning after Mara's unexpected heroics, the compound felt different, electric with possibility and tension. Men who had once barely nodded in her direction now conceded grudging respect, though their eyes still betrayed surprise. Mara moved through the corridors. At dawn, each echo of her boots against the concrete floor reminding her that what happened on the deck would never leave her. Yet, as she braked to adjust her flight suit, sliding her hand over the polished insignia on her chest, she replayed her parents' voices. Her father's low drawl. "You're never just anyone in that cockpit. You're the one with the shot." Her mother's gentle insistence. "Trust your training, Mara, even when it feels like you're alone." Inside the cramped briefing room, Lieutenant Colonel Briggs cleared his throat. He was a battle-hardened veteran in his 50s, with lines cut deep by stress and loss. Still, his gaze softened when it landed on her. "Lieutenant Whitlock," he began, voice carrying both praise and caution. "Your actions saved 20 lives yesterday. But the storm that cripples a transport one day can escalate to a hurricane the next." His eyes flicked to the map projected on the screen, where a swirling maelstrom edged closer to the coastline. "We have a level 4 alarm. An offshore drilling platform has been struck by rogue waves. Structural damage is severe. The crew is trapped below decks. The F-18s will provide cover for the rescue boats, but conditions are untenable. I want you leading the mission." A ripple of chatter erupted, but all voices wilted under Briggs' steady stare. Mara nodded, voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Understood, sir. I'll coordinate with the search and rescue team." She caught a flicker of pride in his eyes before they hardened once more. Dismissed. Outside, raindrops began to patter against the reinforced glass. Mara pulled her COM headset over her helmet, each click a note in a prelude she'd heard too many times. She took a breath. "Drapa, if you're ready to see her face a new kind of storm." Inciting incident. Minutes later, aboard the lead F-18, Mara peered through the cockpit's rain-spattered glass at the distant platform, a Kung skeleton of steel and precarious catwalks lit by intermittent lightning. The platform's distress beacon blinked like a beacon in the darkness. On the headset, the platform's captain broke through. "This is Platform Echo Tango 9. We're losing power on deck. Sea floodings reached critical levels. Recommend immediate extraction." His voice trembled, edged by panic. Mara's voice was calm, her tone the only anchor in the storm. "Echo Tango 9, this is Hornet 2-1. Stand by for assessment. Hold tight, help is coming." Her wingman, Lieutenant Ramirez, peeled off for reconnaissance. Mara watched his sleek form dip below the cloud line, heart thudding. She tapped her helmet mic. "Ramirez, report." No response, just static and the howling wind. Something in the static crackled a faint, desperate transmission from the platform. "We're going under ... Can't hold." The feed cut. Mara slammed her fist on the canopy frame. The platform was moments from catastrophe, and with boats still hours away, time was a luxury they didn't have. "Drapa, if you've ever had your calm shattered in an instant." Crisis and reveal. She banked the F-18 sharply, slipping beneath the lower cloud layer, eyes scanning for survivors clinging to the catwalks. Below, waves like walls of glass crashed into the steel pillars. It was as if the sea itself sought revenge. Mara's hand hovered over the throttle. The only way to keep the platform from slipping under was to stabilize it somehow. But no pilot had ever attempted an aerial tether to a stationary offshore structure. Her mind raced back to late-night simulations with her mother's trauma team improvising attachments, jury-rigging hoists from UH-60 Black Hawk medevac gear, and her father's lessons on calculating winch kinetics in the heat of battle. She flicked a switch, deploying the F-18's refueling probe, piece of gear they never tested for structural support, and drove it through the reinforced hull. Wall of the platform's control cabin. A shudder ran through the jet and the platform alike. Inside the cabin, a survivor's cry echoed. "It's holding barely, Mara Keeter come. Platform Echo Tango 9, this is Hornet 2-1. Secure the line. We're pulling you above water level, prepare for lift." Below deck crewmen scrambled to tie the platform support cable to the probe. Mara eased the throttle forward, the jet's powerful engine roar mingling with the storm's fury. Inch by inch, steel girders groaned as the platform's submerged sections rose. Above the chopping waves, the jet's wings buckled under the strain. Mara's jaw clenched as she fought to maintain altitude. Through the wind and chaos, one man's voice cut clear. "Keep going, Lieutenant." Heart hammering, Mara willed the F-18 upward, every muscle screaming. Lightning split the sky overhead, illuminating the miracle below, a platform, battered but intact, floating above the sea. Drop a if you can feel the electricity in the air right now. Resolution and reflection. As the platform steadied, rescue boats surged in from the distance. Mara released the probe, letting it snap back to the jet with a thunderous clang. She banked away, engines screaming, and punched the afterburner, disappearing into the clouds like a phantom, back on solid ground. The rescue commander approached, voice thick with gratitude. "Lieutenant Whitlock, you just saved 50 lives. 50 souls." Mara exhaled, sweat and rain mingling on her skin. She stripped off her helmet, revealing a face both triumphant and exhausted. "I did what I had to," she whispered, fingers brushing the insignia on her suit where her mother's medic badge was sewn beside her father's sniper wings. Inside, a spark of doubt flickered. Each victory carved her name into the legend of the compound. Yet with that fame came expectations she had not asked for. She imagined her parents watching from afar, proud, concerned, knowing that with each mission their daughter stepped further into danger. She pressed a finger to her temple, remembering her father's final words over the radio after her graduation flight. "Stay hidden until you need to strike, then strike true." The storm's echo still thrummed through her veins as she walked away. But before the thunder faded, a voice crackled on her headset, her next mission briefing. More urgent than before. A flash of lightning silhouetted her figure, slender, determined, unstoppable. And in that moment, Mara Whitlock knew. The calm before the next storm was her greatest weapon, and her only respite. End of Part 2. Cold open hook. The cockpit shook violently as Mara Whitlock's F-18 narrowly escaped a falling rig segment. Her breath caught, and she whispered, "Not today," before banking toward chaos. Backstory thread in the dimly lit operations center. Screens flickered with live feeds from around the disaster zone. Mara's reflection stared back at her in the glass, a slender form draped in a flight suit, eyes ringed with fatigue but alight with purpose. Since Flight 1, whispers had morphed into hushed awe. The college girl was now the unit's secret ace. Still, no one truly knew the weight she carried on her shoulders. Before each mission, Mara returned to her father's old range file's tattered pages filled with wind speed tables and marksmanship drills. She studied them in the hours before dawn, hands stained with ink and determination. And in her pocket, she carried a scrap of her mother's field notes, detailing unconventional triage techniques. Both legacies anchored her whether she soared above storms or navigated after action reports. She rose from the briefing table as Lieutenant Colonel Briggs laid out the new objective. A decaying oil tanker caught between gale force seas and an imminent fire on board. The vessel's structural integrity was compromised. Any miscalculation could ignite an inferno. Briggs's gaze burned into her. "I want your strategy, Lieutenant. How do we save them this time?" Mara felt a ripple of anticipation. The men around her leaned in, awaiting her plan, proof that her reputation preceded her. She inhaled the scent of coffee and sweat, then stepped forward. "We'll corral the fire with precision fuel drops, then deploy a hover pattern to evacuate the crew via sling-load pods." She sensed the doubt in the room until her hazel gaze hardened. "Let me brief the crew." Outside, the rain pelted the hangar doors. Mara's heart thrummed. She thrived in this orchestrated storm. "Drapa, if you're here for another wild ride." Inciting incident. Moments later, Mara's jet peeled off the carrier deck, the tanker's silhouette growing beneath heavy clouds. Waves slashed at the deck. Plumes of black smoke rose into the sky. On come, the tanker's distress signal cut through static. "Fire in holds 3 and 4. Heat's unbearable. Structural collapse imminent." Mara's voice remained a compass. "Tanker control, this is Hornet 2-1. We'll begin fuel suppression in 3, 2, 1. She released a calculated drop of fire-retardant gel, each canister timed to fringe the blaze without igniting adjacent fuel lines. The flame hissed and sputtered beneath the gel's embrace, containment lines forming like celestial arcs across the night sky. But then, the unthinkable, an explosion roared from Hold 5. Flames surged upward as if the tanker had become a living thing. Mara's console lit up. Structural sensors warned of imminent collapse. "Drapa, if you've ever stared danger in the eye." Crisis and reveal. With the tanker's deck buckling, helicopters hovered too high to reach the crew safely. Boats risked capsizing in the churning waters. All eyes turned to Mara. She alone had the vision for what came next. Recalling her mother's field-portable hoist systems, Mara triggered the jet's dorsal refueling pod release. The pod detached, transforming into a modular rescue cage. She swooped low, hovering mere feet above the deck. Flames licked at her wingtips as she aligned the cage's tether with the tanker's midsection support beam. Inside the inferno, crew members clung to the rigging like frightened children. Mara's calm voice crackled, "One at a time, Ty. In and lift clear." The first worker leapt into the cage, searing heat bouncing off his helmet. Mara throttled upward, the cage sailing away from the Holocaust. She repeated the maneuver, each lift a heartbeat measured in courage. But on the final pass, the deck gave way beneath the cage's attachment. The beam cracked. The cage tilted, sending sparks raining into the sea. Mara's heart stuttered. She had seconds to react or the cage would plummet. With surgical precision born of countless drills, Mara banked the F-18 and stabilized the cage's sway, using rudder adjustments to counterbalance the weight. Her slender fingers found the manual. Release, then reattach the tether mid-flight. The cage snapped into place. "Drapa, if you believe in miracles." Resolution and reflection. Hours later, dawn broke over an exhausted fleet of rescue vessels, the tanker a smoldering ghost behind them. Mara sat on the deck, helmet off, her flight suit singed at the sleeves. Rescue team members saluted in passing. She returned each with a nod. Briggs approached, fatigue etched in his features. "Lieutenant, your strategy saved 80 lives. 80 souls. They'll sing of this day." Mara exhaled, hands trembling as she unstrapped her gloves. "I just did what I would have wanted done for my family." He paused, studying her, the myth of the college girl replaced by legend. "Rest now. There will be more." She gazed toward the horizon, the sea's calm mocking her racing thoughts. Each mission etched a new story into her bones, but the narrative was unfinished. She remembered her father's final lesson. Your greatest weapon is the next moment. You haven't yet conquered. Before she could dwell further, her comm crackled with fresh orders, another looming disaster. Mara rose, shoulders squared. The eye of the storm beckoned, and she would answer. End of Part 3. Cold open hook. The hangar lights dimmed as Mara Whitlock's fingers hovered over the activation switch below her. The prototype rescue mech stood ready to launch, and 30 lives depended on her next move. Backstory thread. The dawn after the tanker mission, Mara found herself drawn to the prototype bay, where engineers fussed over the hulking rescue mech, an experimental hybrid of robotics and flight tech. It was a gift from a classified joint program, one her mother had co-developed for austere environments, combining battlefield medevac with airborne stabilization. The mech's skeletal arms could hoist stretchers mid-air, its turbines designed to withstand corrosive atmospheres. Mara had tested every subroutine in simulations, but never in live deployment. She remembered her mother's cautious voice over the comm. "Trust the code, Mara, but trust yourself more." Her father's steady reminder, "A machine is only as good as the hand that guides it." Inside the mech's cockpit, the twin joysticks awaited her touch, surrounded by panels of blinking lights. Around her, the mostly male tech team exchanged skeptical looks, opinions they kept silent when she entered. She ran a gloved hand along the mech's arm, feeling the promise of power beneath the cold alloy. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs joined her, voice low. "The quake zone this time magnitude 7.8, city on the brink. We need the mech." He tapped. A tablet, collapsed high-rise, hundreds trapped under steel and concrete. Egress points minimal. The mech's your lead. Mara nodded, heart steady. She tightened her flight gloves, savoring the calm before chaos. "Drop a, if you've ever trusted more than muscle to save lives." Inciting incident. Within the hour, Mara piloted the rescue mech out of the hangar, its turbines roaring like mechanical thunder. Below, the quake had sheared skyscrapers in half. Dust clouds churned over streets, snapped like threads. On the comms, the city's emergency coordinator crackled. "This is Op Center. Building Meridian with multiple floors collapsed. Survivors reported, but no clear path. Time is critical. The aftershocks are coming." Mara surveyed the ruin, concrete slabs, stacked like fallen dominoes, twisted rebar cages glinting in the morning light. A faint cry emerged from the rubble, a child's sob, her voice cut through static. "Op Center, Hornet mech lead. I'm in position, mark my landing point. Watch yourselves." She triggered the mech's stabilizers. Its legs extended, bowing. Steel in the dust. Each step was measured, preventing additional cave-ins. Engineers on the ground scrambled to clear debris in its path. "Drop A, if you feel your pulse just reading this." Crisis and reveal. Halfway to the cry's source, an aftershock struck metal groaned, and the mech lurched, one leg trapped beneath. A fallen girder, dust rained down, obscuring vision. The child's sob turned frantic, Mara's jaw set. She toggled overrides, shifting hydraulics to redistribute weight. The mech's arms tore into the rubble, prying girder from concrete. With a final hiss of steam, the leg freed. She pivoted the mech toward a collapsed stairwell where a lone boy clutched a twisted beam. Inside the cockpit, Mara's gloved fingers danced over the medical injector controls, priming the mech's integrated medvac syringe, another of her mother's innovations. She extended the mech's arm, lifting the boy from the rubble. His eyes, wide with terror, locked onto hers through the mech's HUD. "Easy now," she whispered. "I've got you." She carried him to safety pod on the mech's shoulder, where waiting medics secured him. But then a voice crackled, secondary collapse east blocks giving way. Civilians trapped. Mara exhaled, adrenaline sharpening her senses. She keyed the comm. Coordinates? A grid flashed on her HUD. 50 survivors, alive but pinned. Mara's mind raced. The aftershocks would keep coming. There was no time for small steps. Drop a, if you're holding your breath right now. Resolution and reflection. The mech's turbine spun as Mara charged across the rubble field, each step a testament to human ingenuity. She deployed tether lines from the mech's forearm, anchoring to intact support beams around the collapsed plaza. With calculated tension, she lifted giant slabs, creating makeshift corridors. As day bled into dusk, the team evacuated dozens. The last extraction was the hardest, a pregnant woman trapped beneath 5 tons of concrete. Mara directed the mech's hydraulic press, inching the slab until the woman slipped free. Weeping with relief, when the quake's tremors finally ceased, Mara retracted the mech's legs and strode back to the hangar as cheering crews surrounded her. The hushed skepticism replaced by awe. Briggs approached, fatigue and pride in his eyes. "Lieutenant, the mech protocol you wrote flawless. You saved over 100 lives today." She brushed dust from her flight suit, exhaustion humming beneath her skin. "Just another day at the office, sir." As the sun dipped below the skyline, Mara looked up, the weight of every life saved, and every challenge ahead pressing upon her. She stared at the mech's dormant form, a machine, and yet, more than metal when guided by conviction. A new alert pinged on her comm. The world's storms, both natural and human-made, never paused. And neither would Mara Whitlock. End of Part 4. Cold open hook. A tremor rattled the control console inside the command module. As Mara Whitlock's steady voice cut through static below, a volcanic ash plume billowed, threatening to choke every living thing on the island. Story thread. Since childhood, Mara had harbored a morbid fascination with volcanoes. Her father, ever the marksman, taught her how to gauge distance by sight. Her mother, the medic, instructed her on the dangers of inhaled ash, both lessons etched into Mara's survival instincts. At the academy, she'd excelled in aeromedical evacuation scenarios set in high-altitude eruptions, mastering the delicate dance between jet turbines and ash-laden air. On the flight deck before dawn, she'd walked past skeptical ground crews who muttered about pilots who chased adrenaline over protocol. Mara never minded their whispers. Discipline and curiosity had always been her compass. She approached her F-18's canopy, polished to a mirror sheen, fingers tracing her parents' wings and caduceus patches like talismans. Moments ago, Lieutenant Colonel Briggs had briefed her. A sudden volcanic eruption on Isla San Marcos had decimated evacuation routes. Villagers trapped in elder care ruins awaited rescue. Helicopters grounded. The ash cloud would expand within the hour. Only her supersonic low-altitude capability could cut through the veil of ash pellet hazards. Her steady hand hovered over the ignition switch, mind inhabiting that sweet spot of calm and purpose. Drapa, if you've ever faced nature's fury head-on. Inciting incident. Mara's F-18 darted through the murky sky, instruments flickering with ash contamination warnings. Through the HUD, she eyed the elders waving from crumbling rooftops. Their eyes pleaded for salvation as rivers of molten rock advanced. Isla San Marcos evac personnel. "This is Hornet 2-1, she broadcast. "Prepare for aerial extraction, I'm inbound." A crackle. Hornet 2-1, ash density critical engines risk stall. Mara's jaw set. She recalled the Academy's simulated engine recovery drills, manual purge routines, throttle finesse. She toggled the ash purge valves, feeling the jet shudder as turbines spat out grit. She flew the jet onto a narrow courtyard, hovering mere meters above broken stone pathways. The ash stung her cheeks as she lowered a custom hoist stretcher. Baskets intended for medevac, now repurposed for elders too frail to climb. Drop 'em if you've ever had to improvise when lives depended on it. Crisis and reveal. As the first basket lifted elders clear, a deafening boom echoed, an explosive vent. A pyroclastic surge roared through the courtyard, searing heat igniting the courtyard flagstones. Mara's HUD flashed critical. Fuel lines overheating, hoist cable at maximum strain. Her world slowed. Years of sniper training taught her the sanctity of a single heartbeat. Her mother's med orders reminded her to breathe even when lungs burned. She banked the jet in a controlled yaw. exposing its wing to the surge and using the heat to vent the cockpit canopy, preventing an overpressure rupture. The hoist cable snapped under tension. Elders teetered in their baskets, plunging toward jagged rubble. Reflex overtook thought. Mara keyed the mic. Eject baskets, activate override flotation. She triggered the pod's emergency air cushion deploy, unfolding ballistic airbags. That softened their descent. A collective gasp aboard the jet crackled. Then the baskets touched down gently, Elders unharmed, eyes wide with disbelief. Mara leveled off, heart pounding, sweat mingling with ash dust. 2 down, 2 to go. She whispered. Resolution and reflection. Back on the makeshift airstrip, paramedics rushed to the Elders. They huddled beneath heat lamps, wrapped in blankets, tears mingling with ash on their weathered cheeks. Briggs appeared, face streaked with soot and pride. "Lieutenant Whitlock, you saved 4 precious lives today, lives I feared we'd lose." Mara nodded, helmet in hand, gazing at the rising sun behind the ash cloud. "I just followed the angles," she murmured, recalling her father's marksmanship ethos. As she walked away, a new alert pinged on her com. Civilian convoy in a conflict zone. The world's crises were endless. Ahead loomed another storm, this time born of human conflict. Drop A if you believe every life is worth the risk. End of Part 5. Cold open hook. Mara. Whitlock's heart pounded as the drone feed displayed militants encroaching on a convoy. Her slender form, tensed at the cockpit's edge, found resolve in the chaos. Story thread. The conflict zone was worlds away from the natural disasters Mara was trained for, yet the tension felt familiar, lives riding on her calm command. She'd spent months mastering combat evacuation protocols, toggling between civilian rescues and military medevac missions. Her father's sniper precision and her mother's field medicine merged in her training logs, a combination her peers dismissed as theoretical until now. At daybreak, Mara reviewed satellite scans, each pixel a human heartbeat. The convoy humanitarian aid carrying food and water had gone dark under enemy ambush 20 miles from the border. Ground teams were pinned. Their voices crackled with fear. Mara walked the hangar floor, boots echoing, and touched the insignia on her flight suit. A dual homage to her parents' legacy. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs appeared, urgency sharpening his tone. "Lieutenant Whitlock, the convoy has hostages. Enemies are using civilian shields. You're cleared for extraction under combat conditions. Rules of engagement are tight. Any misstep, and the hostages pay the price." Mara inhaled, steady. "Understood, sir. I'll get them out." Drop A if you've ever carried hope into the jaws of danger. Inciting incident. Her F-18 pierced dawn's haze, wingtip tracer lights guiding her toward the convoy's last known coordinates. Below, smoke spiraled from overturned trucks. Silhouettes moved between the wreckage. Command 2-1. Visual on hostiles. Civilians interspersed. Must be careful. Static crackled in response then. Negative weapons fire. Disable vehicles. Not targets. Mara's pulse steadied. She toggled non-lethal ordnance, a new prototype soft shock round designed to disable engines without detonation. She remembered late nights in the armory, arguing its viability with weapons officers. Now theory met reality. She lined up the first shot, breath steady, and fired. The engine of a Hummer seized mid-plume of dust. The vehicle ground to a halt. Hostages tumbling free. Mara banked, releasing the second round at a fuel truck's driver cabin without breaching the container of aid supplies. Drop A if precision meant everything to you. Crisis and reveal. The militants reacted, unleashing a volley of small arms fire. Bullets pinned against her jet's fuselage. Mara's HUD lit up with threat indicators, but she refused to fire live rounds. Instead, she executed a series of microbursts of shock rounds, disabling each truck in succession. Below, the hostages scrambled to safety as ground teams regained their footing. Yet one vehicle, a passenger van, veered off-road, hostages still. Inside, the van's engine roared, attempting to flee into hostile territory. Mara's jaw clenched. She couldn't risk standard missiles. With split-second timing, she sensed her targeting pod to deploy an EMP net, an experimental drone launched from her bay that enveloped the vehicle in an electromagnetic pulse, shutting it down instantly. The van's engine died. Silence fell, punctuated by relieved shouts. Mara exhaled, adrenaline and relief mingling in her chest. Drapa, if you've ever felt victory in the silence after the storm. Resolution and reflection. Back at base camp, survivors embraced rescue teams, tears streaking dust-covered faces. Mara disembarked, flight suit stained with soot and sweat. A young girl ran to her, clutching the soft shock round casing she'd found. "Thank you, Lieutenant," the girl whispered, voice small but fierce. Mara knelt, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now." Lieutenant Colonel Briggs joined her, voice proud. "You navigated chaos without firing a lethal shot." 26 hostages saved. Mara allowed herself a small smile. "Rules of engagement taught me everything I needed." Night fell, and the desert wind whispered through the camp. Mara's thoughts drifted to her parents, each mission an echo of their teachings: precision, compassion, ingenuity. She watched stars emerge over the sand, knowing more storms awaited. But in that moment of quiet, she felt the calm before the next storm, and for the first time she welcomed it. End of part 6. Cold open hook. The sonar ping thrummed through the cockpit speakers as Mara Whitlock's pulse matched its rhythm below. An unmapped undersea cavern yawned, hiding a submarine's last survivors. Backstory thread. Months ago, Mara had volunteered for the Navy SEAL Support Program, studying deep-sea navigation and emergency undersea rescue at the behest of her mother's former trauma team. She spent nights memorizing submersible schematics and practicing emergency buoyancy calculations. In the compound simulation pool, she learned to pilot remotely operated vehicles through labyrinthine wrecks. Yet nothing prepared her for an unscheduled SOS from a civilian scientific sub trapped under shifting tectonic plates. Its crew running out of oxygen. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs's briefing echoed. Mare Island Basin, depth 1,800 meters. Wreckage unstable, no submersibles within range. We're sending you. Her heart leaped. An F-18 was no submarine, but Mara had drawn on every lesson: her father's precision, her mother's calm, to conceive of an aerial deployed rescue drone capable of descending on tether lines. Now that concept was real, and 30 lives hinged on her execution. Drapa, if you're ready to dive into the unknown. Inciting incident. Mara's F-18 descended into mist-bound skies above the Mona Basin, deploying the AUV rescue drone, an autonomous undersea vessel mounted beneath her wing, its thrusters glowing faint green sonar beams into the deep below. Hydrophone arrays picked up the sub's distress pulses. Echo sub, this is Hornet 2-1. Confirm life signs. A crackle, 2 souls, bajillion feet, oxygen low. The feed cut. Mara flared the jet, lowering altitude to within deploy range. She toggled the release, and the AUV plunged through layers of water 1,000 meters thick in seconds, guided by Mara's real-time adjustments on the cockpit HUD. Behind her, enemy salvage ships loitered, hoping to claim the wreck for scrap. Drop. If you've ever raced against time. Crisis and reveal. The AUV's sonar revealed the sub pinned beneath jagged bedrock. Structural beams threatened to collapse at any moment. The seconds left for the scientists shrank with each ping. Mara keyed the control. Deploy stabilizer charges, precision only. Explosive she had mapped in simulation, minuscule charges. To shift boulders without fracturing the sub's hull glowed in the AUV's cargo bay. Guided by her steady hand, the drone placed charges amid the rubble. A controlled blast echoed through the dark water, shifting the beams. But then, a secondary collapse crushed the drone's manipulator arm. Lights dimmed. Oxygen reached critical. Mara's chest tightened. The line between salvation and catastrophe narrowed with calm born of years of training. She engaged the AUV's emergency ballast release, sacrificing maneuverability to preserve module integrity. The drone's thrusters flared, pushing it upward toward the trapped hatch. Its integrated welding torch ignited, cutting through bent steel. She guided the torch down to the hatch lock. Drop a, if you believe in defying the odds. Resolution and reflection. Mara watched the HUD as the hatch swung free. Two pale faces blinked into murky light. The AUV's manipulator extended oxygen masks before lifting them toward the sub's escape pod. Above the water, Ariel and Griffin burst from the surface in the pod, gasping at night air. Rescue boats fished them from the waves as the AUV surfaced. Damaged but victorious. Back aboard the carrier, Mara removed her helmet, hair damp with condensation. Briggs shook her hand, awe etched in every line of his face. Lieutenant, countless lives below. You connected them to life above. You did it again. Mara exhaled, fatigue and triumph mingling. Just did my job, sir. As cheers roared and waves crashed against the hull, Mara gazed at the horizon, knowing every saved heartbeat echoed her parents' legacy, and that the next storm awaited beyond the fading sonar pings. Cold open hook, the ground heaved beneath Mara. Whitlock's boots as she adjusted the targeting laser, distant echoes of artillery fire weaving through the canyon, and civilians huddled at the ridge's edge. Backstory thread. Since joining the Disaster Response Unit, Mara had trained for every environment except open combat in narrow terrain. Her mother warned of the psychological toll of seeing human conflict up close. Her father reminded her that snipers and medics both relied on steady breath under fire. In the training grounds, she practiced urban rescue, high-altitude extractions, and Arctic flights. But the war-torn valley felt different, its cracked earth holding the ghosts of ambushes gone by. That morning, she'd shared a cup of black coffee with Lieutenant Ramirez, whose quiet camaraderie and steady support had become rare comforts. He studied the worn maps spread across the command table, then looked at her. Ready for the next mission? Mara simply nodded, tightening her gloves. Their eyes met. In that brief moment, she felt the weight of lives resting on their teams. Split-second decisions. Now she stood atop a rock outcrop, the canyon's walls stained with scorch marks. Below, a stream of refugees, families with children clutching meager belongings, moved slowly toward safety. Mara's slender figure, silhouetted by dawn's light, embodied calm determination. She flipped the safety switch on her laser designator. Drop A if you're here for every heart-pounding second of the mission. Inciting incident. A sudden burst of automatic fire cracked through the air as hostile forces, hidden in rocky alcoves, opened up on the convoy. Bullets ricocheted off stones, sending refugees to the dust. Mara's pulse synchronized with the laser's faint hum. With a nod to Ramirez, she keyed her come. 2-1 to ground team, execute phase alpha, cover fire on my mark. Below, Allied infantry returned suppressive fire. Her training kicked in. Measure the angle. Adjust for wind swirling through the canyon walls. Calculate the beam's safe path to illuminate enemy positions without endangering civilians. Mara steadied her breath and pressed the designator. A pinpoint of light found the militants' heavy machine gun nest. Moments later, friendly armored drones glided into position, guided by Mara's laser, neutralizing the threat. Refugees scrambled to their feet, continuing their exodus. Drop a if precision under pressure is your secret power. Crisis and reveal. As the last family crossed the narrow bridge spanning a chasm, the unthinkable happened. A quake tremor, not natural but triggered by an explosive device, rattled the rock walls. collapsing the bridge's midpoint. Parents screamed. As children teetered on the edge, Mara's heart stopped. Without hesitation, she dashed toward the broken span, bullet casings crunching beneath her boots. The canyon floor yawned tens of feet below. She checked her line of sight to the next extraction point, a makeshift cable car rigged by the engineers, swaying precariously. Her mind flashed to childhood hours spent rigging climbing ropes with her mother, each not a promise of safety. Reaching the ledge, she drew a compact tactical rappel kit from her harness and anchored it to a sturdy boulder. With swift precision, she descended the fractured bridge, lines humming. Nearby, a young boy clung to the rail's jagged end, tears mixing with dirt. Mara paused mere inches above him, her slender form braced by the rappel. "Hold on tight," she called, voice gentle yet forceful. She looped the kit's carabiner around the boy's waist. Then, with a practiced tug, she hauled him upward along the engineer's cable car. Every inch was a gamble. A misstep would send both plummeting. Drapa if you've ever bet everything on a single move. Resolution and reflection. Once the boy was safely aboard the cable car, Mara ascended the line, muscles burning. Above, the team signaled to launch the evac platform. As she reached the ledge, the quake's aftershock shook the canyon once more, but the cable held. Standing dry-eyed beside her comrades, Mara removed her helmet and offered a tight smile. The engineers and infantry gathered around her, their relief palpable. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs arrived, relief flooding his face. "Lieutenant Whitlock, you gave that boy his future back. You saved 30 lives today." 30, he paused, eyes shining. "You're rewriting the rulebook." Mara's pulse finally slowed. She glanced at the ravaged canyon, the path she'd carved. "Through danger." Her father's words echoed. "Every mission is a shot in the dark, make it count." She touched the rappel kit on her harness, a silent tribute to her mother's teaching. The canyon's walls fell silent, bearing witness to her resolve. Above, the morning sun cast long shadows. Mara Whitlock exhaled, a warrior and savior in one, ready for the next call to action. End of Part 8. Cold open hook. A crackling transmission cut through Mara Whitlock's headset. "Mara, we've got a code black biohazard breach in Sector Delta, civilians exposed." Her pulse jolted. She yanked the canopy closed and throttled forward, determination hardening her slender frame. Backstory thread. Mara's confidence in crisis was born from her unique upbringing. Her mother's medic kits had taught her to treat wounds. Her father's sniper precision had taught her to calculate under pressure. Yet biotech emergencies were uncharted territory. During training, she'd spent weeks learning containment protocols, sealant foam dispersals, rapid decontamination rigs, and pathogen-specific flight approaches that minimized aerosol spread. Few believed an F-18 pilot could lead a biohazard response. But Mara's calm in the cockpit was as crucial as her hands in the field. That morning, after the canyon rescue, she'd retired to the biohazard lab, reviewing safety protocols with on-call specialists. Her hazel eyes scanned chemical agent charts as her gloved hands traced the molecular structures of airborne toxins. Around her, male officers jotted notes, still unconvinced she could manage a combat flight, let alone hazardous materials mission. Mara didn't mind. Knowledge was her shield. As she climbed aboard the F-18 Biohornet, newly equipped with containment pods and UV dispersal systems, she recalled her mother's voice. "You adapt or you fail, Mara." The memory anchored her as she ran pre-flight checks, each click of the instrument panel a promise of control amid contagion. Drapa if you've ever faced an enemy you couldn't see. Inciting incident. The base sensor arrays had just detected an unauthorized release of a deadly airborne pathogen at the civilian research facility in Sector Delta downwind from a densely populated township. Standard hazmat teams couldn't approach. Winds were shifting unpredictably. Mara keyed her mic. Hornet 2-1 to command, ready to engage biodispersion module. Static blinked back then. Proceed with caution. Failure is not an option. Flames of adrenaline flickered behind her calm facade. She harnessed the Bio-Hornet's external pod-sealed units outfitted with counter-agent foam, UV radiation wands, and air filtration sprayers. In the cockpit's dim glow, she flicked the switches. Tanks hummed as counter-agent warmed. Below her, the facility lay in ruin, slick with chemical runoff and failing filters. She rolled the jet into a low sweep, engines breathing caution. The onboard sensors mapped the plume's trajectory, a ghostly cloud drifting toward Holmes. Drapa, if you believe science can be a lifeline. Crisis and reveal. Mara initiated a precision dispersal pass, releasing pulses of biofoam into the heart of the plume. The foam's microcapsules activated on contact, binding pathogens and neutralizing toxins. Her HUD flickered warnings, turbulence from thermal updrafts, possible engine contamination, and pilot exposure risks. On her third pass, the foam mist clogged her jet's intakes, alarms blaring. She wrestled the controls, switching to manual override for the sprayers while engaging the UV wand system intense ultraviolet beams that sterilized the remaining airborne particles. Her slender fingers danced over the console, rerouting bleed air to cockpit scrubbers, preventing internal contamination. Each move was a dance of survival science's application under fire. The plume thinned, then collapsed in a fine mist of harmless vapor. Hornet 2-1 to command. Plume neutralized. Initiating containment sweep. From the ground, hazmat teams advanced through a cleared perimeter. Mara banked away, scanning for any resurgence. Her chest tightened as she watched the final pockets of the cloud dissolve under UV assault. Drapa, if you trust courage to light the darkest threats. Resolution and reflection. Back on the runway, Mara shut down engines. The cockpit silent except for her steady breath. Technicians in biosuits approached, nodding in respect as they decontaminated exterior surfaces. One specialist removed her mask and offered a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Whitlock, the facility's now safe. You saved thousands of civilians from exposure." Mara unstrapped her helmet, voice low, all in a day's work. She recalled her mother's field clinic, sterile and calm amid carnage, and her father's sniper nest, silent and precise. Today, her training bridged both worlds. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs emerged from the decontamination tent, his face drawn. "Your adaptability is unmatched. You turned science into a shield." She nodded. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in ember hues. Though the biohazard was sealed, Mara sensed the next invisible threat gathering on the wind, another crisis calling her name. End of Part 9. Cold open hook. The radar screen blinked with a relentless pulse as Mara Whitlock's gloved hand hovered over the decrypt key, each second ticking closer to a cyber sabotage that could cripple every rescue operation. Backstory thread. Weeks after the biohazard breach, Mara had immersed herself in the cyber defense briefings. Her mother's medical logistics and her father's sniper-level focus merged into a fascination with precision code. She spent late nights in the command's dark server room, tracing malicious packets and learning to harden the rescue network. Colleagues considered it outside her flight suit domain. A pilot shouldn't need to moonlight as a coder. But Mara knew vulnerability lurked in every line of code as surely as it did in every storm. This morning, she'd pored over encrypted logs, piecing together fragments of sabotage, waypoints redirected, refueling sequences altered, emergency distress. CANNEL rerouted. Her hazel eyes burned with resolve. The next attack was imminent, threatening to strand convoys in hostile territories and cripple disaster response teams. Mid-mission. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs found her at the server rack. "Lieutenant, we've traced the threat to an offshore relay station. If we can't stop it before midnight, Every link goes dark. You're leading the cyber rescue mission. She nodded, heart steady. I'll get our network back online. Drapa, if you're ready to fight an enemy you can't see. Inciting incident. Mara's F-18 soared toward the relay buoy field. Its external pod replaced with a secure signal jammer and uplink module. Below, dark waves slapped the unlit buoys, each a potential node for hostile code injection. On comms, the air crackled. Sector control to 2-1 be advised. Relay nodes are broadcasting a kill signal. All unscheduled drones are shutting down. Mara's voice was calm steel. Copy that. Initiating manual uplink override. Prepare for node-by-node reboot. Strapped into the jet's cockpit, she patched into the communications console, her fingers flying over the micro keyboard. Lines of alien code scrolled up the screen, each fragment a trap. She recalled her night's debugging simulation routines, her mind tracing logic pathways with sniper-like precision. Drapa, if you trust skill over chance. Crisis and reveal. Lightning split the sky as Mara piloted the F-18 low over the buoy cluster. She deployed the uplink pod, which latched onto the first relay tower. Through the HUD, she accessed the node's firmware. A countdown timer appeared. 45 seconds until total system lockdown. Her slender fingers danced across the console, injecting decryption patches and overriding malicious routines. Each keystroke had to be perfect. One error, and the node would self-destruct, taking her uplink with it. At 10 seconds, an explosion rocked the pod. Enemy code had triggered a secondary charge buried in the firmware. Alarms blared. Mara's heart hammered, but she forced her breathing to calm. With 3 seconds left, she executed a one-line surgical script, her mother's logic for deactivating hostile payloads, neutralizing the trigger and rebooting the node. The relay light flickered green. A cheer crackled through the headset. As Allied drones regained control, their propellers whirring back to life beneath her wings. Drapa, if you believe in hacking the impossible. Resolution and reflection. Back at the carrier, Mara removed her helmet, sweat dampening her brow. Technicians swarmed the buoy retrieval deck, hauling the uplink pod aboard. Network engineers cheered as the global rescue network lit up on their screens. Briggs approached, pride softening his stern visage. You restored the lifeline that keeps us all connected. Without it, dozens of missions would have failed. You saved countless lives. Mara allowed herself a small, weary smile. Just didn't let the enemy write my ending. As dusk fell, she stood at the edge of the deck, looking out at the endless ocean. Every crisis had sharpened her skills, each mission adding a new chapter to her hidden expertise. But the world's storms, both natural and human-made, showed no sign of stopping. The next alert pinged in her headset, a stark reminder. The darkest threats often hide in the deepest code. And Mara Whitlock was ready. End of Part 10. Cold open hook. The broken tower's silhouette loomed ahead as Mara Whitlock's F-18 sliced through the sunset haze, her cum crackling. Brace yourselves, this countdown is your lifeline. Backstory thread. In the quiet of the hangar before departure, Mara had reviewed every blueprint of the city's collapsing infrastructure. Years of reading structural schematics under her father's patient tutelage taught her that metal groans before it tears. From her mother's trauma bay, she carried an instinct for triage. Identify the most critical and save them first. Now, ancient city girders teetered above a trapped hospital wing. Every second Mara spent in the cockpit was someone else's ticking clock. She slipped into her flight suit, the caduceus and sniper wings on her chest feeling heavier than ever. Around her, ground crews whispered about the impossibility of an airlift through crumbling urban canyons. Mara didn't flinch. She thrived on the edge of impossibility. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs offered a thin smile as he handed her the mission. Dossier: 400 civilians, hospitals without power, a levee ready to burst. It's all in there. Mara's hazel eyes scanned the pages, absorbing the stakes. She clipped her helmet on and met his gaze. Let's save some lives. Drapa, if you're ready to dance on the razor's edge. Inciting incident. City's grid glowed beneath her as she descended through plumes of dust. The hospital tower, partially collapsed, housed the gravest cases: infants in incubators, critical care patients on ventilators. All power lines severed. Mara keyed the "Come, Hornet 2-1 to ground. We're cutting the skyline for a power drop in -30 seconds." A hush fell over the rescue teams, scanning rooftops. She toggled the innovative power relay pod, an experimental battery array linked to solar collectors stored on the F-18. Its cargo bay doors slid open, revealing the pulsating energy cells, ready to animate dark corridors. Drapa, if you believe hope can light the darkest place. Crisis and reveal. As Mara approached the drop zone, tremors shook the streets. A secondary quake unpredicted rattled her HUD, disrupting targeting overlays. She fought the controls, stabilizing the jet as the hospital's central atrium windows shattered. Below, doctors gestured frantic signals, patients convulsing without power, oxygen levels plummeting. Mara's slender hands flew over the release lever. She timed the drop, despite the oscillating towers, and sent the power pod gliding down the shaft. Tethered by a carbon fiber cable she'd calibrated herself, the pod's thrusters kicked in. Mid-air, soft landing on the balustrade. Sparks flared as the crew on the ground secured it to the emergency junction box. Lights flickered. A cheer rose from the rooftop, but the earthquake tremors accelerated. With no runway for a takeoff, Mara faced another dilemma: hover until conditions stabilized or risk catastrophe. Drawing on her father's calm under fire and her mother's trust in instincts, she chose to hold. Drapa, if you'd stand your ground when the world shakes you loose. Resolution and reflection. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Mara maintained hover over the decimated skyline. Engineers confirmed power flow. The incubators whirred back to life. Monitors beeped in rhythm, and ventilators sighed relief. At last, the tremors subsided. Mara guided the F-18 to safety on a cleared rooftop pad, engines throttling back. She unstrapped and descended, breathing in the cool night air, tinged with smoke and jubilation. Colonel Briggs met her, exhaustion and gratitude etched in his gaze. "Lieutenant Whitlock, you gave those families a future tonight." "Nearly half. 1,000,000 watts of hope." Mara exhaled, fingers brushing the patches on her chest. Each mission etched a new purpose, yet the horizon remained infinite. She allowed herself a rare, soft smile, knowing the next crisis would call again, and she would answer with the same quiet mastery that they'd once dismissed. End of Part 11. Cold open hook. A distant rumble rolled across the sky as Mara Whitlock's F-18 dove through the polluted air on full afterburner below. A coastal hospital teetered on the brink of collapse, and every second counted. Backstory thread. Since her first mission, Mara's life had become a tapestry of high-stakes rescues, storm-tossed transports, inferno-racked tankers, quake-shattered cities. Each victory etched into her resolve. Yet she carried ghostly echoes of the hospital where her mother once saved lives with a makeshift field clinic, an institution now crumbling under the weight of an environmental catastrophe. She recalled childhood visits, sterile corridors lined with patients and the steady hum of life support machines, her mother moving among them like an angel of mercy. Those memories fueled Mara's commitment when she volunteered to lead the offshore toxification response and learn the dark calculus of chemical warfare. In the quiet hours aboard the carrier, Mara pored over satellite scans revealing the hospital's structural damage from a massive undersea methane eruption that had liquefied coastal sediments, undermining foundations. Engineers doubted that an F-18 could deliver the sequence of power, stabilization, and medical supplies necessary to avert catastrophe. But Mara trusted her instincts and her parents. Lessons that ingenuity and compassion could bend any protocol to save lives. That morning, the hangar was a furnace of activity. Medevac helicopters stood grounded by toxic plumes. Cargo ships lay idle offshore, and supply drops had failed to pierce the ash-laden clouds. Mara climbed into the cockpit, slipping her hands into gloves stamped with her mother's caduceus and her father's sniper wings. Over the intercom, Colonel Briggs's voice crackled. "Hornet 2-1, you have the go. The hospital's margin is 3 hours before total structural failure. You're our only hope." Her pulse steadied. She keyed the mic. "Understood, sir. I'm on my way. Drop a, if you believe one pilot can change the fate of many." Inciting incident. Storm clouds churned above the coastline as Mara's jet rocketed toward the hospital. Below, windows shattered from seismic tremors, smoke curled from ruptured gas lines, and the hospital's helipad lay fractured, inert. Mara's HUD glitched with ash densite,